Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Deployed Engineer channel. And today we have Siddhanth Romani on our podcast. And Siddhanth is an AI developer at Autonomous Machining. He's an AI engineer there, doing a lot of interesting things. One of the things he's done is building some OCR models over there. And he graduated with a master's degree from UC San Diego. Did a specialization in machine learning, and he has an ECE as well. Besides that, he has worked at other roles as a data scientist at Impact Analytics, and he is experienced in this sphere, and he has a lot to share. Is there anything you'd like to add on?
Thanks for the intro, Bo. Excited to be here, but that was a great introduction. So, yep, that's me.
Yeah, awesome. Could you walk us through into how you got into this field, what your journey was like, and how passionate are you about this? Tell us about that.
For sure. So, right now I'm in the AA sort of thing, but it's also like software, right? So, it's AA and software. I got into software like in the 11th grade. I'm from India. So, in 11th, you get to like actually do software coding, and that's when they start teaching you. So, that was my sort of introduction to software. And I continued learning different parts of software, maybe like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and even Python programming, etc. through undergrad, through college. And I also got introduced to machine learning there, the famous Andrew Ng course, with the deep learning.a sort of subset of courses on Coursera. So that's how I got in the field. And then I worked as a data scientist for like about a year, where I was working a lot with libraries, like working with libraries for CNNs, etc., PyTorch, you name it. And post that, I was working as an AI research engineer for some time in a chip-based startup where I did more research and how not to use deep learning, how not to use machine learning, and just use like traditional logic to sort of like for computer vision applications based on in the automobile sector. So that's something I was working. And I did my master's, and then at UCSD it was focused on machine learning, but it was a part of the EC department, and that sort of led to the a engineer slash software engineer role here that I'm currently at.
That's great. So, what does your day to day look like as in your role? What kind of things? How does your day look like typically?
That's a great question. Right now, I'm working on like a couple of different projects. One of them is AI based, and maybe we'll touch on that soon. It's like OCR based, and that is something that I'm working on, which has like a lot of deep learning, but also like a lot of software, regular AI, just like intelligence, logic based stuff, also software development. I'm also currently like building a dashboard for a specific use case, and that is like pure software development. So with regards to the workflow, with regards to my day itself, like I mean, I go to work. And right now I'm using a lot of AI tools, and so it's more about like just interacting with the AI tool to get the code done. It's like it's fast paced. Just get the product out, a working product out, a good quality product out, which can be extended, but get the product out. And like through the day, I just work on these two projects for now.
Cool. So, what are the programming languages you're using? What kind of frameworks are you using day to day? And even if you could narrow down and tell us some of the interesting AI tools that you kind of use, because they're making a big difference now. For instance, I'm using tools like Cursor, Cloud Code, and I see a massive, burst in productivity day to day. What are some things that you're using?
Oh yeah, I'm using AI a lot too, and I agree with the productivity part. It's there's a massive difference, and it's sort of like software has reached a stage where it's not going to go back. I do see like a lot of like more maybe like senior developers not adopting it as much. The newer generation is sort of adopting it a lot more, and that's not going back. Like this is the new norm, and everybody will start using it. So with regards to the language, I predominantly work with Python, mostly Python, because that's the language that is good for fast prototyping. It's decently secure, and especially with regards to the deep learning space, there's like a lot of libraries, etc., to make development very easy. So Python is what I predominantly work on, and even with the backend, I work with Python because it's just like so much more easier, and you don't have to worry about the tiny details of thing. You can just like get the code out, and so Python is something that I'm working on. With respect to AI tools, initially I started with I did try like Cursor and things like that in when I was in masters, and it was fine. And I went to like ChatGPT when I first started the job, but it was sort of like it's ChatGPT on the cloud, right? So you sort of like copy a prompt, you give the logic, and it gives the logic back. And even that was a massive boost in productivity. Like since I started the role, I've not like really written down a lot of code. It's more about like telling, and the tools do get stuck sometimes. So you go and give like a better logic, and they sort of understand, and you work with that. But for the past couple of weeks, based on Shushan's recommendation, we have shifted to Claude, and that's like a massive it's completely different, right? Because now it's got like a lot more context on what you're doing, and you just like get it on the plan mode, ask it to just like spend tokens to get the context in, and then you can just like start going. Um, even this sort of like has the logical, like some complicated logic it doesn't get, but if you tell it and if you ideate with it, and even the specific logic, if you think about it yourself and then you give, it just codes it out. There is very minimal actually hands-on writing code. It's so bad that even if there's only like one line of code change, I will ask Claude to go do it. Like, I don't even want to go to the file, and I will have a look at it. It looks fine, you go do it. I'm not going to type, so it's, for me it's like 100%, close to 100% no typing, 99.99% no typing. And it's a massive, massive productivity boost. I think, yeah, that is the new norm and there's no going back.
I totally agree. I find myself actually doing a lot of that. I feel like the bottleneck now is not like producing code; it's like queuing the code, like looking. It's like you can't just keep up with the amount of stuff that's just done. You're like you have to like look into it, and you're like, wow, I just can't believe it. So
Yep.
I'm on the same page. Plan with Opus and then use 3.5 Sonnet, just like
Yeah.
boom, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. Actually, we had a quick look at Codex, and
correct.
I mean, people did say it was good, but then when we tried it out, it wasn't as good. But now that the new model, I mean, I'm not sure if we tried with ChatGPT 5 or the previous version. So maybe we can retry it. It wasn't as good. Claude, I think, is just on like a whole different league. At least personally, that's what I feel. But
Yeah,
yeah, testing remains the bottleneck. Like, sorry to interrupt you, but testing remains the bottleneck. You get so much code out for you to actually look. I mean, sometimes I think we'll start reaching a stage where if the logic seems to be working fine, right? We'll just let it be. Like, we can't go look at every line of code. If there's a problem, let's go back and, fix it instead of checking every line of code in a way.
100%. Like it's crazy how like all coders are super pumped because you don't have to do all the boilerplate stuff. You're like
Oh, yeah.
you feel like a manager now, right? Like you're like managing the junior developer.
Yeah. You're almost like a senior developer. You just architect the system and then it sort of codes it for you.
Yeah,
It's
that's insane.
perfect.
So
Yeah.
how long ago did you start like using AI assisted coding?
Actually, like during my master's, a lot of people started using it, but I didn't want to do it because maybe it wasn't the right idea, but for me, I didn't want to influence, I didn't want to lose knowledge in a way. I want to do it on my own. So all the projects I was doing without AI. And one of my final sort of courses, they allowed using AI. And that's when I started using it. And it sort of outputted, but that was sort of like assignment that get done, right? It's not like an actual product that you're going to release. For the past 2.5 months, from the day we started, our sort of like our CEO or the founder of the company, he just like pushed us. This is the new norm. You gotta pick it up, and you guys are the new people coming in, so you should be the change makers in a way. And so we started using like GPT, like I said, for the past 2.5 months, and for the past maybe a month, it's been Claude, and I really don't know what. If you ask me to go back uh, to not using Claude, I'd be very hesitant. Like, you lose so much by doing something like that, and you gain a lot by using Claude or any other tool. Like, I don't want to like tell one specific tool, but Claude, I believe it's just like out of the world today.
That's yeah, I agree. Like I think this has been the sentiment when I spoke to so many engineers. In fact, I had a recent podcast with the head of engineering, and he said that he actually gets his coding agent to do the task. He goes grab a coffee, and then he wakes up. Like,
Yeah,
isn't that funny? Yeah, and he comes
yeah,
back,
that's
he's like, oh, it's done, right? So I think a lot of engineers, even a person who is really experienced, is finding that delta of efficiency when doing this type of AI assisted programming, But you have been a data scientist, and I could see the delta in terms of the software engineering, the applied side, and now I'm an AI engineer, so I do use a lot of these models and their APIs and RAG pipelines, whatnot. You have
Mhm.
been on the side where you were doing a lot of data science stuff, right? I'm wondering, like, this AI assisted coding, how does it translate to data scientist in particular? If you, as a data scientist, right,
Mhm.
were to use this, you're using this technology. So how does it assist? Because I'll give an example. As a software
Mhm.
engineer, I am using it to, let's say, build a backend service, and then I would use it to write unit tests, and then I'd get it to run the tests and like sort of help me with that. Data science has a particularly a distinct flow where you clean data, you write the, you write the training code, and you run, and there's a flow that's distinct. So what's your flow in this sense, and what would you sort of have to give a tip? You have a fellow friend who hasn't used this. How would you give them hints on how to use this?
That's a great question. Let me think, because I'm not actually used AI for data science, so I just want to think on which paths it will help me. So any sort of product, right, whether it's data science or not, it will have like a lot of business logic, regular business logic, and so for those sort of things, like it will immediately help, right? But with regards to the data, like the whole sort of pipeline of data science, I think yes, that's a great question.
Yeah,
I think
you
the
you
data
can take your
cleaning,
time.
yeah, I think for the data cleaning side of things, etc., it will help anyways. Like because you're coding, you have to like clean the data in a way, and so it's just like easier. You don't have to code; it will sort of code it for you. But it's sort of like a set pipeline. Like there are like a couple of things you will try. There are a couple checks that you have to run it through, etc. And so in that case, it'd be like very very helpful because it's almost boilerplate. It's almost boilerplate code when it comes to those sort of process and understanding and visualizing and things like that. Of course, you have to like check the data and see where it is, but that's sort of like set code. In fact, I guess like companies can start like having like a set of code just tweaked or just like good context for that sort of role. But once that is done right, once you get the data in, then it's almost like a machine learning role in today's world. You do like a lot of non-machine learning stuff also, just like analysis and plotting graphs and things like that. And in that case, I think AI will help in sort of maybe writing SQL queries. That's one part of it, but also in sort of ideating on what for the sort of rows and the fields of the for the sort of fields data has, what sort of insights can you glean out? What and so I think in that way it would be like a great help because it can just like go search online, see what's been done, and sort of help you with that. Uh, but yeah, so in those ways, I think it's sort of like maybe specific to the field of data science as such. But then there's also like a lot of coding, like general coding, general machine learning things that it will just help it. Like the coding part will just help it.
I see. Yeah. So from what I understand, it's basically you could still leverage a lot of assisted coding to help you build those boilerplates, and then you use your brains. I think there's libraries like TensorFlow. You could probably use AI assisted coding to get you that
Yep.
boilerplate to train your own type of maybe image recognition models or whatever use case you're using like such a library for, and use this AI assisted coding to speed that process. Right. That's
Yep.
what I'm understanding. Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, that's nice. So, what are some interesting projects that you have worked on? Especially I'm curious usually on the Gen AI side because I think it's brought out a new frontier of capabilities. But just in general, what are some recent interesting projects you've built? I'm just curious.
With regards to the recent projects, I think the tool that we are working on is like very interesting and quite a challenging role in a way. So I can't delve into what the project actually is, but one thing we
Hmm.
can sort of like understand it's OCR for a specific industry. And the problem there begins with the lack of data in the industry because it's sort of like such a it's sort of like a different industry. There's not like a lot of data sets available. And one of the things that I believe is going to happen with regards to general deep learning is that data is going to be the key. Because the models, there are just so many models, and I just don't see people about like 3 or 4 years back, right? When I first joined the field, it was still like nascent in a way, and transfer learning used to be like such a key word to use. Like I did transfer learning. I took the weights of a model, and then I transfer knowledge by training it on new data, right? But today's the norm. Like nobody's gonna go ahead and build like a specific. Nobody's building model architectures. People are just using ready-made models, and it's always just like fine-tuning on your data, just pretty much transfer learning. Right? And so, like from a company's perspective, what gives you the edge? One edge, like other than the business edge, from a pure deep learning perspective, it's really the data. It's the data that you have. And this could be for any domain. It could be because in my domain it's sort of specific because that's a lot of lack of data. Data becomes even more key in a way, and if you have it, then you can build a product. Otherwise, you just can't build a product. Whereas even if you look at like an OpenAI or a Claude, Anthropic, there is data becomes like the most key part, and they're probably spending a lot of time just on the data, and the data is sort of key. For them, there's also a lot of research and engineering going on. I'm not denying that because they are sort of the frontier research companies here. But data is probably it's definitely still very very key, and they're probably collecting them in petabytes. So data is key, and for the OCR model that we have, we are using like a lot of open source sort of variants, etc. But in my opinion, getting the data to match, getting the data good is the most important part. And that's something that we worked on. And I think we've gotten to like a pretty good standpoint. And that's something that I learned with the current project that I worked on. The data is key.
Interesting. I was just curious about like how much fine tuning companies will have to do on open source models versus having this general purpose closed source models doing everything really well. Do you have an opinion on that?
That's a great question. That's a fantastic question. And even I wonder that, like, so one thing is when you have when you have a general model and it's not fine tuned to a specific use case, and there's another model which is fine tuned to a specific use case, the fine tuned model is going to win for sure, right? That's what I feel. Like no matter what, it's going to win for sure. So if you look at it from that lens, then I would say fine tuning helps. But then how much edge is that going to have? That depends on the industry and sort of like the data that the original big model was trained on. There are like a lot of use cases and a lot of tiny industries in the maybe in the manufacturing side or maybe just industries where the sort of LLMs were not trained for that sort of thing. And vision goes right. Multimodal works, but it's sort of like for vision, it's just better to use a vision based model than a multimodal for maybe like an object detection or something. It sort of works, but a specific model for this sort of use case works much better. That's one aspect. Another aspect is also like we have to consider the sort of compute available. Right now, a lot of us are dealing with the cloud, and so compute is really not a. We don't consider it a big issue, but a lot of companies do work on like small chips or et cetera, right? And a lot of work is going on efficient AI. And when it comes to that, I think there are not enough open source models fine tuned on specific data weights. I mean, they're not big models, right? So you have to fine tune. There's no other option out. And so you can do like a smart fine tuning, like a knowledge transfer. Not knowledge transfer. I forget the name for it, but yeah, something like that, where you have like a teacher model and a student model, and it sort of like learns, right? Knowledge distillation, things like that. You can be like efficient with that. Maybe train a big model and have a small model which sort of feeds into it. But yeah, at the end of the day, compute is still sort of like a bottleneck, um, especially for like different use cases. It will consume no matter what. It will consume some cost, and so if we want to get on the cost, we have to and be better. Maybe fine tuning helps. But it's a great question. Let's see how it pans out.
Yeah, that's thanks for that insight on that. Something to think about. So, besides just like writing software outside work, are you using these things, the AI models, in maybe to do some specific things, like just maybe brainstorming? I don't know, therapy or whatever it is. Like, are you using how are you using it outside work?
I'm using it a lot for learning. I'm using it, and if you want to consider learning, I've been using it for undergrad, from grad, like from my masters, I've been using GPT to sort of learn because
Okay,
if you ask it the right questions, it gives you a good response. And if you want to like know something in depth, you can really like sort of converse with it. And it's a wide. It's just like it's sort of like you can go to Google or you can go to a book and read and ask questions and things like that, but it's not as not it doesn't have like a lot of knowledge. It's a specific set of knowledge, and if you ask outside the knowledge realm, it's like hard to get the knowledge, not to gain hard to gain that information, right? Whereas with like a GPT based model, it can go fetch information. It already has like a lot of knowledge, and the UI of like communicating with it is so much more easier. And so I think learning is I've been using it a lot for learning, and I think it's fantastic for it. In fact, I don't know front end, so I recently started learning like React and this that, and I've been using Claude for it because it's not just like a GPT online. It's fine tuned or it's specific to code, and it has like a lot more knowledge and just so much more easier to learn with it.
interesting. Is there any specific prompts or workflows you use to learn? For instance, like do you tell it to break it? Like, let's say you want to learn about React. Like,
Mhm.
how would you approach it? Right? It's like having a human in front of you. There's a million ways to converse. How do you start? How do you break down? Do you take notes on a separate page? Do you save conversations? How do you go about it?
That's again a great question. I think prompts and context is all that is key. So with regards to learning, there are like a couple of things that I follow. One of the things that I follow is don't use jargon, and if you're going to use jargon, explain it to me. That is one prompt that I almost always use, especially at the start when I'm first starting to understand. Another thing that I do is you have to be very clear but also very crisp. Don't give random information, but also be very detailed. And I will ask you questions. I will ask very thought-provoking questions. I'm not going to let it be something like that. I will write at the start, and at the end, I will always go for a build it up. like build up the knowledge base. So start from the basics and then build it up for me. And that sort of helps a lot. The building it up part, I think it will start slow and it will sort of like go like different levels and things like that. Level one, it will sort of like give like a general picture and then it will go in depth. And I think that helps for me. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And it's sort of like when it gives an output, sort of I do interact with it in the sense I will go, this is sort of wrong. What do you think about it? This is the way I would have approached it. What do you think about it? And things like that. So I do make it like a two-way perspective instead of just like listening to information. I don't store it. I don't store it in any place. 'Cause I like to I like to imagine I have to store it in my brain. So I don't have like a coding workflow for it because I'm not gonna like if I want to revisit the chat, I'll just like revisit that particular chat rather than have it as a follow up for like future chats. At least that's the way I'm using it right now. But yeah,
Nice.
just build it up from scratch and pester it with questions that go in depth. I think it helps a lot.
That's cool. Did you follow the most recent OpenAI Dev Day where they were explaining the whole idea of building workflows where you
Oh,
drag
I did not actually.
elements? Yeah, it's
Wait, is it the
interesting.
GPT-5 release or is it like a more recent one?
It was a more recent one. It was like I think it's like so recent last week. So
Okay.
they introduced something called an agent builder, agent
Hmm.
workflows. So you drag yeah, you
I
drag
heard
like
about it.
it's yeah, yeah, exactly. So you drag stuff, you drag workflows on a canvas, and then you can create custom UI widgets. So instead
Hmm.
of having plain text conversations, you can have customized interfaces as results that the agent gives you when you're conversing with it, right? Yeah.
That's
So
fantastic. Yeah.
I was very curious about what people think about this, but maybe you should check it out. It's a very fresh feature they released. Curious to see where it goes. Some things didn't work out. Like if you noticed, they tried to create custom GPTs. I'm not sure. Do you use that?
What
The
is a custom
custom
GPT?
GPT? Yeah. So I don't think it took off pretty
Yeah.
much. They created like a way for people to create this individual GPTs, right? And that simply is changing the system prompt, right? And
Hmm.
having that system prompt named as something. You could say, oh, marketing writer,
Hmm.
video script editor, and all it is
Okay.
it has a individual, they call it
So they're sort
custom
of
GPTs.
okay. They're sort of agents in a way, or GPTs in a way, but they're not fine tuned. They're just prompt
They're
based.
not. It's just the
Yeah.
system prompt put somewhere, and then they put it out in a marketplace, expecting like people to use it. I'm not sure how it didn't quite
Oh.
take off. I
Hmm.
found it interesting because some companies were trying to use that model, applying it to their businesses, but seems like it didn't really take off as much. So I'm curious to see how
I'll check
this
it out for sure. Yeah.
yeah, the new workflows work because the workflow is another experiment I think they're trying to do. But that's cool. Another a question I like asking folks who are very technical, and we as engineers we have like a good feel for the vibes of like, oh, this one is good for this, is good for that, right? Do you have any like preferences besides I saw you using Cloud Code, but are you using any other models for very specific things? I'm just generally.
I actually use Gemini for like quite a lot. I think so there are like different things that I've tried. One of the things is I've used Copilot with PDFs, and that worked very well because it's sort of integrated with it's integrated with the Edge. And we open a PDF in Edge. They had a mode where you can ask questions about the PDF itself. So imagine you're reading a book and you want to just like go and ask a question. You'll be able to like just ask right here on the chat, like just like a dialog box will open up and you can ask and it will sort of go fetch information on whatever knowledge base it has. And it's so much more easier because I'm reading a book, I have questions. I don't want to go and search. It's right by the side. So in that sense, I was using Copilot for that. Gemini, I think Gemini has a much better world knowledge in a way. For example, initially when I started with the problem statement that we have and we are part of the manufacturing industry, GPT wasn't as good. At the point of time, it was GPT-4 or some version of that, and that wasn't as good in terms of the breadth of knowledge it had. But Gemini was so much more better, and especially when it comes to just like if you want data, if you wanted to generate data for maybe we weren't using it for this, but for something else, we were trying to like generate data, a good variety of data, and a lot of it. Gemini was able to generate it much better than any other model. And I just found that interesting, and for that I've used Gemini. And one other thing is YouTube. Initially, they had like a trial where when you're watching a YouTube video, they have this ask sort of UI where you can ask Gemini questions while the YouTube video is going on. Um, Again, for learning, it was helping a lot. So maybe all my examples are revolving around like different forms of learning, like a PDF and a video and things like that. But for learning, it was helping a lot. And they sort of removed the feature. I don't know why. Maybe I was part of like an A/B testing group, or maybe they just like thought it was burning too much tokens. I'm not sure. But yeah, so for those sort of things, I was trying out different models. But all of these are
Yeah,
big. I'm not sure if you'd like work with like small, slightly smaller models, but they have like a lot of hype in the sense a lot of people like say, why use a large language model? But there's a very clear distinction between a small model and a large model. There's it's like a big difference. Like a small model, even if it's like finding for a specific task, it's not as good. Whereas when you get to that scale of I don't know how many like 100 billion params, or I don't know where the current is at, maybe like a trillion params. But that scale is just like completely different. There's no catching up to that.
interesting. Do you think like small models will have any specific use cases? I was discussing with a friend. He's like, it might be good for routing requests to multiple models, or just having on-device, functionality on devices that don't really have a lot of compute available, right? What do
Mhm.
you think about that?
That's a great point. I think even in the current workflow, they probably have a small language model in the front, like in almost all the GPT, etc. And it will be routing, and they're not using a big model for that, right? So in that case, I think they will be using it. With regards to resource compute intense, like resource constrained environments, definitely a small language model because there's no other option. Maybe like knowledge distilled from a larger language model, but still small, right? And I think I'm not sure. There's this MIT Han lab. I'm not sure if you know about it. They deal a lot with efficient AI and efficient ML and ML for the edge. And so there's like a lot of techniques that they use to sort of just like predominantly knowledge distillation, I feel, but like to ensure that small devices can use like models pretty well. And so I think for those sort of use cases, it does come. But for a more general generate even like a decent amount of text or make a slightly more difficult decision, unless the small language model is fine tuned for that case. Even for routing, it's probably fine tuned for that specific thing. I don't think it's like as general as it gets. Whereas when you want generic stuff, when you want some sense of intelligence in a generic realm, I think small language models suddenly just start tipping in a way. If it's fine tuned for a specific task, they sort of work. But at least with the architectures that are available today, that's my experience with it. Because I tried like a small language model locally for like a basic task like just like choosing. Imagine you're like downloading a bunch of images or whatever from the website, right? Sort of classifying them. You give a prompt and then you try to classify. It was doing a pretty bad job. Whereas if I replaced it with a GPT token, it was doing well. And so maybe if it is fine tuned for a specific use case, it would work, but otherwise, I'm not sure. I mean, of course, a lot of research is going on into it. I think Google also released like a recent paper, something along those lines. Yeah. I mean, they'll be doing like a lot of research, but yeah, I saw one paper. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the insight on that. What do you think about coding in the next 5 or 10 years? What is the extrapolation? What, in your opinion? No one's right in this, but I like to ask people this question.
What do you feel? I want to first like uh ask you just to gain some insight. I've been
Yeah,
talking too much.
yeah, I sure, okay. So I think I strongly have an opinion that we'll come to a time where certain languages, programming languages, yeah, right, which are extensively trained, and they're part of the training data of these large language models. They'll become really, you wouldn't really have to use any sort of hand coding. And I've found a lot of different examples of how this relates to the industrial revolution. Somebody told me it is the handloom where people were using their hands to weave and do all that stuff. And it was a very specialized niche skill which you would be proud of and highly paid. Only the elite had access to. And the future will be like that for engineers, software engineers, where you're no longer the craftsman who's building those watches. You'll be industrialized, and you'll be the person trying to learn the machine that makes that. And you'd only craft that watch if you really love the crafting. And there'll be fewer number of people doing that kind of a thing. And so we'll rise up to a level where we'll be more of orchestrators, right, of these things. And we won't be spending so much time doing something that the computers will automate, right? Because the way I think about it is writing software was a means to an end. It was a way for information technology to be more available, right? When you write a software or website, it's not for the sake of writing a website, but it's for the sake of disseminating that information across the world so that people are able to see that. When you make a post on Facebook, it's so that you're disseminating that same information to somebody or a big number of people. And that applies to everything, whether it's a business to business application or a business to consumer application. So I think if there's a process that makes that faster, it's good. And I also realized that the demand for software seems to be a lot more than what was being set. So there'll be a lot more demand for this type of a thing, right? So that's my take on this matter. Yeah.
Quick follow up on that. You mentioned that it's not. I do agree with a lot of the points, but then one point that I'm curious about is you mentioned that with regards to something like watch, right? There are still handcrafted watches and sort of special in a way. Whereas with software, I don't like. I just think they will go all the way. Because is there any efficiency that can be gained out of hand, or something special that can be gained out of actually writing code? Whereas in a watch, that's sort of there, but for code, I'm not even sure. I just think it will completely shift. But what do you feel about that?
You know, the way I think about it is they say a lot of banking applications have been written in languages like COBOL. There's
Hmm.
also assembly, and I don't know how many people write assembly anymore, but I can bet that there's a few people that do, right?
Yep.
And I think those few people are exactly what I'm saying. It's like those few selected people who decide that I'm going to learn assembly because I just want to learn it, right? I just like being close to the hardware, and they learn it because they enjoy it. And there'll be like those few people who still maintain the assembly machines, right? So you still I think that will be the case for programming in the future. We still have assembly, right? But fewer people write it. Punch cards used to be a thing, and like, it's no longer there, but the abstractions reduce the need, but there's still a few people that are at the abstraction level, still like at the level below the abstraction, I think.
Yep. So more to like maintain legacy software, and also maybe if it's like a case where you have to go to the assembly and you have to like optimize it at that level, then you have to do it.
Yeah, that's what I think it will be like, based on my thinking. Unless like machines get crazy good that you don't even need a human. Yeah.
Or they just train it on assembly and Cobalt also. And now the Cobalt
Yeah.
engineers are all like,
Yeah, it's
what's
like
gonna happen to me?
it's yeah. It's still crazy though, because like, I'm pretty sure like all the large language models are trained on like the whole JavaScript manual or TypeScript manual and the whole CSS manual, but for some reason they still fail at writing good CSS. I don't know. Did you notice that? They just suck at front
I'm
end.
not I'm not experimented with it yet. Because front end I'm still
Yeah.
learning. But
Okay.
yeah, maybe. I think, yeah, CSS. I think with Vision, the models are still not that good. In fact, I thought front end would be one of the things which has like a lot more boilerplate in a way, and that will get replaced first. But it sort of seems like the models are still struggling with it. Whereas they're actually doing very well with logic. They're doing exceptionally well with logic and maybe even like backend software. But yeah,
No,
it's sort of weird.
I'm totally on. I'm not denying the front end is. I think front end software is being automated a lot for sure.
Hmm.
That's why there's companies like Lovable, there's companies like Bolt, which are doing
Yep.
extremely well. They're like unicorns, Replit, and I think the reason is like front. It's so easy for large language models to generate like front end code. That's for sure. But there's very like particular things that it doesn't do well. You have to you have to maybe prompt it 5 times before it gets there, and like give it so many examples. But that said, the first, like, it does give you something very usable in the beginning, and I think for the
Hmm.
most part it gets there. It's just that it takes a lot of attempts, right? You would expect it to like follow the instruction right off the bat. For example, if you uploaded a screenshot of like a Figma design and you said, make this, I've noticed it never gets it right the first time. You still have to go and say, hey, like this is alignment is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And then it gets to a point where it does that. And then there's also the aspect of it won't refactor the code itself. You have to say, use good engineering principles, break it down and do
Oh
this.
yeah.
So have you noticed that? Yeah.
Yeah, but I think those sort of things they'll start fixing it. Those sort of things I'm just hoping they will start fixing it off fast because it will just write some shoddy code sometimes, but sometimes it writes code better than I do. In fact, most of
Yeah.
the times, many times it writes like pretty good quality code. Sometimes it just, like you're saying, even the basic sort of principles sort of like go away, and so you have to direct it. Yep.
Yeah. How about you? What's your thought process on this?
So one obvious thought process that's not going back. Like, I'm telling it for people. I think we were we just like correctly aligned. Like when we are sort of like entering the industry, or when we are new in the industry, these tools started come out. But I'm sure there are like a lot of senior engineers, maybe not in the famous big companies, but in very good companies which are more tinier, right? And they would be like, hey, what is this? Like, do I even have to try, or things like that? If you want to remain competitive in the market, like, people are going to be using it, and that's the only way forward. I actually feel like it will replace all across the stack, whether it's assembly, whether it's Cobalt, anywhere, because people just like fine tune models for that specific use case or train it on that, and it will start to explore. And I mean, one of the things that I was wondering is the cost perspective. Right now, I think Claude is at like $100, which is like very reasonable. And I was talking with my mother, who was a project manager at IBM, as to whether, if it is like $100 in India, would they be pushing it? $100 in the US, it's fine, right? But India, will they push it? And my mom was like, definitely, because it's like, if I'm gonna pay like a software engineer, maybe even like a 50K or a 55K, and if it's gonna give this much of a benefit, then I'm just gonna spend the extra 10K. One reason, the market will demand it. There's no other way out. And also because it is still not that heavily priced. And so one thing that I wonder is like, how is the cost gonna go? Is more engineering, better and better engineering, gonna like keep the cost constant or drive it low? Or is this the starting price? And are they gonna like start pushing it out? Because GPT-5 used to be like free so much because they wanted the training data, right? And then now they've almost limited it. Like if you pay the $20, you get always the free version. You don't get a lot of GPT-5, and so that is something that I'm like, because nobody, I'm not sure the finances and the amount of investment that's been going on and the unit economics are so clear to people. Like they have not been told to us. I think we'll try, and engineering and research is trying to like bring it down, but I'm curious as to where it goes. That sort of thing. But it's gonna get better. Like you were saying, right? The software engineering principle, I think that's like a reasonably easier fix. Like it's not at the cutting edge for you to have a problem. In fact, one prompt, like we have in our company, we have a person called Brian. He's a super cool guy. And he's more on the machine side of things. And he's starting to adopt Claude. Like we told him about Claude, and he's using Claude to build a lot of tools locally for himself that will help him. And he told he learned like a computer, like coding maybe like 15-20 years back, and now he's just like prompting and using his logic to build like, and they're good they're good UI that you can use to sort of like this thing, right? And so I think that's one place where Claude sort of pure vibe coding will definitely help. In fact, maybe if I can just stretch on that point just a bit more, it's sort of like one of the things that we want to do was build an annotation tool, and we were able to very easily build it with 5 hours of pure vibe coding, because I'm not going to lose anything. If the vibe code is wrong, I'm not going to deploy it. I'm going to use it locally. But the local version of it, it's so much more customizable to what I'm. So it makes our workflow very much more easier rather than downloading like some sort of from the internet, and it's not too specific. You have to like tweak around. So in those sort of things, I think it will have like a huge impact. And I don't know what I was speaking about when I sort of jumped off to this. But yeah, I think a lot more people will start using it for like smaller tools, and in the larger tools, they'll start fixing. Yeah, one of the things that Brian found out was, if he's building a project, like a small project, he will just ask Claude to do a web search on similar projects on GitHub. And that had a big impact. And I was like, that's a
Okay.
genius idea.
Yeah.
Probably like at some point of time, Claude will realize that's a default thing to do, because right now the web search is like, it's not doing it. It's
It's
using a
not
local
really.
context and it uses
Yeah.
something, but the web search doesn't default go to GitHub projects which are similar, get the code out and do it. So I thought that was a genius problem. I was like, once it started doing it, it got so much context that it became much better. So I thought that was like genius idea. And those sort of things, it will start becoming a part of a like default workflow in a way.
Yeah, I like that because sometimes just starting out with the template, or I did notice that when the model sometimes when you're building even AI applications, they'll try to use deprecated libraries. So you have to either use MCPs to get it to try and call newer documentation APIs, or you have to maybe tell it to do web search, or you like just copy paste a document from the web on a local text file, and then you tell the LLM to like scour through that and then use that as a context. So multiple ways, but this is like so true, right? If it has like a, like you save so much on tokens, and like just like so much effort saved on this, like if you already have a boilerplate on top of that, or a repo it can scan through. So I think that's a good workflow hack for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I faced the deprecated issue a lot, actually,
yeah,
quite a lot. And it sort of just doesn't understand also, like, for some reason, even if you go forward, it will sort of forget it also. Doesn't even remember it. It will sort of like shift, and you got to like hard prompt it multiple times. I faced that, but it's been a while since I faced it. I'm not sure if it got fixed or I just didn't run into the issue for some other reason. But yeah, that was an issue that I used to face.
that's cool. So just a bit of a segue now. I was wondering, what advice would you give yourself or anyone who's maybe doing computer science right now, and it's a different evolving world, right? What kind of thought process or frameworks in terms of thinking, learning that you'd apply now, or even not, maybe you think, okay, the principles are the same, don't use it, doesn't matter, use it, doesn't matter. So how would you advise yourself?
That's a fantastic question again. Let me think. I don't want to give like some generic or some bad advice. So I did think about it. I thought about this question. And one thing that I was very clear of is you still need knowledge. You still need the depth. You still need the breadth. That is not going to go away. AI is not going to replace that. And even if AI becomes more and more better, the way I see it, if there are two individuals, one person who doesn't have the knowledge, one person who has the knowledge, who's going to use the AI tool better? The person with the knowledge. Same thing for a company and the fine tuning thing, right? You have like two models, which is going to perform better. Like the person who spent more time learning and understanding, they would be, at least in the long run, it will be better off. And so that is like a general thing that I will say. Like, don't skip on knowledge. Knowledge is not going to disappear. If you know more and if you can make the system more efficient or better, with respect to another person, you will still have an edge. If AI becomes so good that even a person without knowledge is, then that's like a different league altogether. Till we hit that league, it will definitely matter. And with regards to, and one of the things that I wonder is, like you were saying, right? People have started become senior engineers in a way wherein we sort of like tell what to do, and the code will like the AI will sort of like code it up. And sometimes it does it even without this thing, but it's more like a senior role. And I think we don't know how much the AI progress is going to happen, but it will sort of like, as long as it's happening, it will keep going up. And junior engineers, I've seen like a lot of people say like lead code has become redundant now that AI has come in. And so like interviews will get harder because people start, people say, hey, you should also know system design because the AI is gonna like code it up for you. Like, and it will start, if you expect it today, like after like a 3-year work X or a 2-year work X, they will start expecting it like a lot earlier because the other parts, someone else is doing it for you. And you need to be at that level to actually be competitive in a way. And so I think, and also a breadth of knowledge. The system design is one thing that I spoke of, that I'm saying, but also a breadth. Like if you know front end and back end, and you can code with both, then you're definitely going to have an advantage in today's world. And that will sort of like, I wonder if it will start getting, if people will start expecting more knowledge out of new grads rather than less knowledge. And so I think the reverse could happen. Yeah. So just focus on the base. Like if from an advice perspective, learn more, understand more, and between two people, the person who knows better, the person who's more efficient, the person who can get more done will win. It's not a
That's
zero sum. Like it's not like
yeah.
by will win is better. Like um, it will definitely help.
I agree. Like there's gonna be like an expectation to kind of do more as time goes in less time, because you can outsource some of that work to some other, this models, for example. So I think it makes sense, right? So everyone's gonna be pushed to like learn this thing. I think the caveat, like I think I was talking to somebody and they were, as an engineer, they were complaining how they're being pushed to do so much, but the rate of learning is going down because half the times they just have to ship something before a deadline, and they still didn't fully understand what they did. So,
Yep.
there's that issue, but I think it's a fickle balance. So you still have to consciously attempt to still try to keep learning while you're doing what you're doing. But, big question is like, how much of that should you put a conscious effort to keep learning, right? Like maybe you're learning a bunch of React to CSS, which, 3 years later, it's like, so
Yeah.
useless. So you're like, right? So It's
Yeah.
one of those things I don't know.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. Like I told like learn, but if you're gonna learn something which is gonna become redundant, then what is even the point, right? Yeah. But yeah. Sorry, go on.
So yeah, no, that's just I think I don't know how many people have the right answer, but it's interesting to just like have a discussion around this type of a topic, you know. So it's fine, it's fun.
I also
Okay,
wonder whether people start moving up the chain in the sense like we don't know how much it's gonna go, right? But like would people be starting to expect like marketing and domain specific knowledge and those sort of things? Like you go so high up. And the higher up you go only depends on how much the model is gonna cover up, right? The more it starts covering up, the more you're gonna be pushed higher up. And so maybe like the most efficient society in a way, or maybe like the models go so well that the people who think, who ideate, who understand marketing and business, they will start popping up, and maybe like small groups of people start getting together, form businesses, and it becomes like a what is a trade called, man? Like in the ages where barter trade or something. I forget the
barter
name for
trade,
it.
yeah, where you exchange goods for goods. Yeah,
Goods. Now it's sort of like exchange like businesses in a way. Like my business does this, I will give you this, and then I mean, and the sort of extra negative you pocket as money. Like we don't know how much it's gonna go, right? I was like, what is the most that will be pushed? But that's like super far down is what I feel. We're already facing like a lot of engineering and research bottlenecks, but yeah, that's super far down the line. But just like a
yeah,
thought
yeah.
process.
We're enjoying the ride until like it's right.
Yeah.
So that's what it is. So yeah, I talked to someone. They were like, okay, people will end up becoming like sales engineers, marketing engineers, or finance engineers. Like you become more connected to the domain to get those things to implement the software and the tools rather than be in the weeds of just doing that one specific thing. So that's kind of cool. Okay, so I think that, and then now, I was wondering, like, where do you learn stuff on a day-to-day basis? What's your go-to resources that you like to keep up with the news and the development, tips and tricks? Yeah.
I think development is happening so fast, right? It's almost hard to catch up and just like stay up to date with work, like you were mentioning before, right? How do you even manage it? It's so hard. One thing that I like to do is not worry about anything and just like focus on things that I like to learn. I just love to learn in general. And so I'm just like doing some, like right now I'm learning React. I'm just like trying to like learn as much as possible and not even like thinking about it. With regards to learning resources, like I do use books a lot, like digital books, and like I use like Copilot with that, but it's been a while since I did that. I use YouTube a lot, and I have like a lot of these I follow this lot of like channels which don't have like lakhs of subscribers. They're so good. It's like they have like a lot of quality content, and funnily, when YouTube channels go more in depth, right, and speak more about the nuances and the details of how things work, it's like people start listening less. If you see all these like even the big Stanford courses, etc., there'll be like an exponential drop off in the number of views. The first thing would be like 2 million views, and if you go to the 15th episode of the same playlist, there'll be like 10% of the views, right? And it's all like, where did all those people disappear? And anyways, there are like a lot of good YouTubers who are not as famous, but do like a lot of quality content. And there are some people that I follow and learn from. And
Is there
right now, a
one or
lot.
two specific YouTubers, one or two which you think, oh wow, like stand out, that maybe somebody could check out?
With regards to computer vision, I just like create a LinkedIn post. There's one channel called Explaining AI, and he's very good. He actually goes into how. So if you have like an object detection model, right, or any computer vision based model, there's so many things non deep learning that has to be done. Like after it comes, it will just like give like a lot of boxes, and then you have to like filter out all the boxes. And how do you filter out, and how do you actually map, and how the model actually learns? It's all abstracted away, but it's so interesting to learn how all of them work. Like I said, I believe like the more knowledge you have, the better it is. Of course, it's not even required now because like frameworks implement it for you. But it's so interesting to understand the details of how different models work. And explaining AI for computer vision is something uh, that I would like highly recommend. And bizarrely, I would say the Stanford and the MIT Open courseware. Like how many people watch the first video, but why did they not watch the last one? Why did they just not stay till the end? For LLMs, I will actually recommend there's this professor from forget the name of the university. It's called Rahul something. And in fact, I think it's better than the Stanford LLM course. Um, Yeah, I miss his name, but he's got like a YouTube channel. He's part of like I think UCSC or one of those universities, and he like puts out like content on LLM from his actual course, and I think that's very very good. And I think Stanford also released like a recent one of like a whole CS3 something, which I'm yet to check out. But yeah, I just like do like a lot of I watch a lot of YouTube, and that's where I predominantly learn from, and
Oh
books.
yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah,
Wasn't
something
like a
that
big answer. I think you
yeah.
wanted like a
I know. I think like it doesn't just knowing which ones to check out, right? Then you decide, oh, like this one's for me or not, right? But
yep.
just yeah, I think explaining AI seems to be something I'll check out. I don't follow it, so I'll check out. And you said Rahul, right? Rahul from
Rahul.
yeah. I'll check out and see if I can find
Yeah, and if I find it, I mean, maybe once you paste on YouTube, I can share it and then we can share
yeah.
the
I'll
link
put
or
it
something.
maybe in the links or something. Yeah,
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 they're very
yeah,
good. And it's like
yeah.
free content. I was like,
Wow.
why won't
Yeah,
people
it's
listen?
all there, right? It's all there, free of cost.
Yep.
Nice. Cool. Is there any other thoughts you'd like to share while we
Oh,
conclude
one
and
thing I
get
wanted to
to it?
ask. Yes, one thing I wanted to ask was I wanted to ask you about you work a lot with voice, right? And I wanted to understand voice better, audio better. Like, how do you train deep learning models for audio? I've done like ML for music and things like that, and that revolved a lot around just taking the Fourier transform and using CNNs. So I'm curious as to like what is the state of the art now, and how do they deal with audio? Because audio is huge, right? If I gotta like deal with every single I don't know what it's called, but every single data point for a single audio clip, it's just too much. So, like, what is the state of the art there?
Yeah, audio is a complicated beast because, like, the way people are solving it, there's very many different ways people are solving it, right? These companies like Hume AI, which are saying that, hey guys, like, no need to have an audio pipeline. Like, we're gonna have voice to voice straight out. Like, we're gonna train models end to end, and the way people do is like there's kind of a bottleneck with data collection, right? The models are as good as the amount of data you collect. And internet text is easy to aggregate, right? You go to Reddit, you go to YouTube, you go to Facebook, you can put that all together, train the models on that. Voice, how much of recorded data do we have available for training? Not so much, right? So
Mhm.
voice, from what I know, is like there's still a lot of ongoing work with how the innovation is going to happen on that domain, right? But when it comes to the companies doing really well right now, right? Like most of like I'd say like 50% or more of the I'd say voice agent companies, they're using like a voice agent like a pipeline, right? Where they have these phases where they have, speech to text and then there's an LLM and then a text to speech, right? And
Oh, okay.
Everett's innovating on like this three parts, right? Obviously, the companies doing the voice are not so focused on innovating on the LLM part because OpenAI and ChatGPT are doing. But I saw there were recent companies like I came across one project which is called Morpheus, which is pretty much a large language model that's like uh trained more on like audio transcripts type of thing. So it knows that okay, this is the intent. This is so the way it knows, the way it has the context it has around sounds and emotion, intent, and whatnot, right? So it outperforms in many ways the models like OpenAI when it comes to like when it's plugged in a voice AI pipeline, right? But the innovations being done by companies like DeepGram, which are actually building models which are low latency, because humans, oddly enough, are very sensitive to latency. Like if I delay this sound by a few seconds, then all of a sudden it sounds unnatural, right? Or if I use certain words, I glitch, you can tell that difference. Like
Immediately
it's
catch it.
almost you're
Yeah,
so sensitive. Yes. Whereas in when you write text, it's not the same. Word uh stream like 3 seconds later and you're like, okay, fine. But if you somebody says the word 3 seconds later, like you'll be like, okay, this is not correct. It's not, something's off, right? So with the voice has that challenge of like latency and then emotional intent. You could say the same word in five ways. You could sound sarcastic saying the same thing, right? You could sound happy saying the same thing. There's an emotional intent detection So there's also a lot of companies trying to get on that front, like, and then there's like the transcription part where when you say something, you could have a question mark at the end or a full stop sometimes, right? So how do you know, like, when you're transcribing this full stop or a question mark, right? So the companies like Assembly and which are trying to like be like, okay, how do you transcribe this? Because the funny part with voice as well is we think it's just voice to voice, but seems like they're bits and pieces. Like, for example, transcribing alone is $1 billion market because think about all the doctors in this world in their surgery rooms talking to a dictaphone, trying to get the notes done, right? They need to get all those scientific terms written correctly. They can't afford to have a mistake on those transcriptions, right? Because it's somebody's life. So if so, and so just building the accuracy on the voice to text for those transcribers is a whole sphere that you can innovate indefinitely and make a big impact. So that's the state of voice, in short, that I just can share about pretty much.
A couple of follow-ups though. I'm very interested in the voice space.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing you mentioned, right? The latency part. The latency is very important. And I think
Mm-hmm.
like with voice, even like you were saying, the small shifts can be picked up very well. For example, one of the things I was doing with music is ML for music is music generation, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
sort of like if you're doing like image generation or video generation, if there's a tiny sort of the ear isn't correct, people won't notice because people are just gonna, oh, it's gone. As with audio, if it's going, you will immediately catch
Yeah,
there's
that.
something wrong there. So it becomes like a much more harder space in a way. So like two questions. Like for speech to speech, I guess we have like a lot of audio, right? Because it's semi-supervised and we have like podcasts and things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
speech to text, I think is where maybe data collection is not as good, especially like we're saying for like very niche fields, still sort of misses out. And for speech to text, I'm curious as to what they do right now. Like, do they still do CNNs or have they sort of like,
Yeah. They're doing sirens, but there's been like a lot of innovation which I'm not very aware of. In this, there's a model called Flux, and maybe you should go read on it. I haven't. I have to. It's on my reading list. But there's a DeepGram's released a model called Flux, which has an interesting architecture for voice. And you could probably see like the type of innovation they're doing on the speech to voice, like I mean from text to speech. They're using like a very interesting way of like doing it. I forgot off the top of my head. I wish I could explain it better, but maybe you want to check that out. Deepgram has a very nice paper on it for their latest. It's, I think it's free this month if you want to go try it out. I think I'm not affiliated, but I attended a conference where they were explaining like the stuff and seemed like interesting. So yeah, but when it comes to application part, I'm very much like using these systems, right? So I try to like use orchestration platforms. There's a company called VAPI, which is
I've heard
doing
of them.
this yeah, they're doing orchestration. So you are relieved of trying to innovate, on the applied side. So you can plug and play. Like if you feel like, oh, like this, there's a better company, like Cartesia did better than Deepgram on one piece, you could plug it in. And then you're like, you know, I feel like Morpheus is doing better than OpenAI on most things. So you plug it in. And then you're like, oh no, this, for voice to text, this is doing better for transcription. Assembly is doing great. Switch it out, right? So you're free to like switch around, similar to how you're using, let's say, using cursor. If GPT ends up becoming better than cloud, you switch it and you write code because you care about that. So I think that's when building agents, that's the interoperability of these things is what I feel like personally I'm trying to do that, because I'm not building the whole infra myself, right? The other piece is
Yeah, that
like,
makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, and the other challenge with voice actually is doing the evals. So testing, right? Like, how do you test all the combinations of a conversation, right? I've shipped some things and like people are trying to actively break it. Like the people are like, I know this is a bot, I need to try and break this thing. So they'll ask about like, they'll ask their bot, they try to reverse, like they try to like hack the bot or like get it to say some things, and you have to account for all those things. So there's one more complexity around testing, because it's not like the unit testing part is also complicated. Like you have to test like the way it'll respond to different questions, but you have to use like a voice bot to test a voice bot maybe. But then how do you know the voice bot's reliable? You have to test it, and whether it's tested
Yeah.
enough scenarios, right? So there's a complexity with that. Yeah.
Also for speech to speech, like you were saying, right? Maybe there's not enough data sets for that too. Because by speech to speech, it's also like Q&A, right? So in
Hmm.
a podcast, I mean, people are talking a lot. Maybe in podcast, we can get the question answer sort of pairs. But in general, YouTube videos or something, when somebody is just talking, that's not like, there's no mapping, there's no input and output, right? It's just like an LLM, you can just like generate some sort of audio, and it could be like for nuances of audio on the way it sounds and things like that, maybe it could help. But in terms of the question answering itself, the final fine-tuning part, maybe for that it's harder to find data. But yeah, very interesting space. And I wasn't thinking of the problems with like users trying to break it, right? It's like because they don't want to
Yeah.
listen to the bot, they would know it's a bot, and then they would try to mess around. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a huge challenge usually. Like just doing the testing it is, and uh, when you make 500, 1,000 calls and you test them, you start like as a human, you start losing that efficiency. So actually, voice testing is a huge. There's this few startups trying to solve it. So it's a good thing. Maybe we'll have as those improve as well, we have more reliable agents in the future. So yeah, I'm super
And by
interested in that.
testing the Q&A part of it, right? Like, is it giving the right answer for the question, or is it following up properly? Is that the sort of testing? Is that
Yeah,
one?
yeah. So happy paths are easy. Edge cases are infinite, right? Edge cases are infinite. Like, yeah, you can give it system instructions and be like, hey, don't talk about this, don't talk about that. But what if like, your model was trained on something specific, like specific years, but you're using a different year, and it's like some reason it's training data set had some type of training that conflicts with what you kind of what you not trying to say, right? So you have the conflicting things it can decide upon for the answer, right? So you have to like test that comprehensively. Maybe it's using an old rule from like 1980, but like 2008 had a different rule, and it's maybe like making a guess from 1980. So you have to like, in compliance especially, you have to like think about that, right? Like, oh, you'll be like, oh wait, I didn't specify the rule here, because so one user got different answers. So like, oh no, I have to make sure it's 2008. So things like
So
that.
by rules, do you mean for the like once a speech to text is done and the LLM part itself, the system part prompt rules is that what you're referring to, or is that like some of the rules that is being applied elsewhere?
Yeah, the rules, I mean, like, you are, by the rules, I mean, like system instruction, right? It's having a
Mm-hmm.
good system instruction. So for the LLM, right? For
Mm-hmm.
when speech to speech, like you still have some level of system instruction, even in speech to speech, like usually, just in general, like when you're testing when the agent is in production, like the whole thing goes as one, right? It doesn't go as pieces. So you have to realize like the model itself, like the LLM, right? Even the middle, kind of there's intent detection being passed to that, right? Like, oh, Sid is unhappy, like you're pissed customer on a phone call, right? So the intent is passed to the LLM saying, hey, Sid doesn't sound like he's happy with the call, like, angry, and like, so the model has to like try to use more empathy, or so there's a, how do you
That's
test
crazy
that
hard.
versus like, okay, somebody's happy, right? Like it's a different test, like rules now for, so how do you know it's behaving or it doesn't act mean or what? And could be anything. So
Oh man, evils are very hard then. Yeah,
yeah, so
that's
it's a
very hard.
bottleneck. Yeah.
Yeah. And so in the speech to text, like these sort of emotions also get captured, like when you're doing the speech to text transcription. Because once you feed it to the LLM, it's only getting the text, right? That's all the context it's going to have. So are you also like, will the speech to text also give like in brackets or something the
Yeah,
emotion
you are
later?
passing. Yeah. The best ones, like I think almost everyone's passing in emotions. So your first part of the pipeline is definitely passing. It has intent detection for sure. It has emotion intent detection. All the new stuff, all the new models which are doing like speech to text, they all have intent detection because it's so core to the way humans communicate. So they have to have it, you know.
That
Yeah.
makes sense.
But
Perfect.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, thank you so much for yeah, for the
yeah,
this thing. Like, I mean, we can do more questions, but this is very insightful.
yeah,
Voice is something that, I mean, even if you go to like YouTube courses or anything, right? Voice suddenly there's not like a lot of content available. Vision you have a lot, text you have a lot. Voice is still not as much as the other two. So yeah, thank you.
yeah.
I was curious about this space.
No,
That's great
yeah,
that you're a part of it.
happy to
Yeah.
share. Yeah, yeah, it's happy to share that. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think we're toward the conclusion. I have one question passed on from the last guest. I'm gonna rephrase it. It's more about the Kardashev scale and like energy. So the question was like,
Okay.
how will
So it's hard.
humans leverage? I'll try to simplify it. So how will humans, who actually like so? How will AI help humans harness more of the energy of the earth and the universe, right, to get more done? So there's something called a Kardashev scale, I believe, and that's about
Type
how
1,
much
type 2 civilizations. Yeah.
exactly type 1, type 2. Yeah.
I think I wonder if we are in a type 0 to type 1, so like we are tending towards type 1, right? I think in type
Hmm.
1 civilization, it's not just like about, I wonder if it's about optimally using all the energy or like fully predicting everything. Like you'll be able to predict how the wind patterns move, etc., etc. I'm not sure which one it is. But one way I think about it is that any sort of skills like that, right? It sort of, it tells how much more, how efficient humans are becoming. As a civilization, how efficient humans are becoming. And with AI, it's a level of productivity. It's a sort of efficiency. And so the more efficient we become, one way to think about it, right, is imagine we are writing code and the code is not as efficient. It's going to consume so much more energy. And it's going to consume so much more energy. The world is just a bit more less efficient in a way. And research won't be as fast. So one thing that I'm saying, like efficiency matters the most. A civilization's efficiency is what I think the Kardashev scale, or I don't even know how to pronounce it. I'll always have a problem with the pronunciation. Is trying to capture, and AI is just going to help. It's going to help with research. It's going to help with ideation. And if you noticed, I think Terence Tao was speaking about Terence Tao, the mathematician.
The
He was
match.
speaking about how he's using AI for research and how it's helping him sort of like solve tiny problems within the bigger problem that is, and it's accelerating. So it's sort of like when it comes to an efficiency perspective, AI is going to have an impact everywhere. And if you're going to become so efficient that we can utilize all of the energy, we can optimally, we can predict everything, we can control everything, then that's other option than AI. In fact, I wonder like if AI will live longer than humans, like if systems will start living longer than humans, and that is all the less that's like too, that's too meta and too long term. Yeah. But interesting question. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, thanks for that. All right, so we're at the end of the podcast. I think is a good one. I think we exchanged a lot of insights.
I had a lot of fun.
Hopefully, yeah, people took something away from it. But yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining the Deployed Engineer channel.
Thank you, Bolik. Thank you all.
Bye.